In a distant corner of the galaxy, far from the bright lights of civilized space, a group of alien mercenaries gathered aboard their sleek, metallic cruiser. The ship hummed with energy as its crew prepared for their next mission. Among them stood Jax Corvin, a tall, scared warrior with piercing eyes that seemed to see through anyone who dared meet his gaze. He was the leader of the Krylos Vanguard, a feared band of fighters known for taking on the most dangerous jobs in the galaxy. But today, something was different. There was an uneasiness in the air, a tension that hadn't been there before. The briefing room was dimly lit, with holographic maps floating above a circular table. Their client, a wealthy representative of a galactic syndicate, stood at the center, explaining the details of the mission. The target was a remote mining planet, home to valuable minerals, and a growing rebellion led by enslaved human colonists. The syndicate wanted the uprising crushed quickly and quietly. Jax listened intently, nodding occasionally as the plan unfolded. But when the client casually mentioned the presence of Earthborn units among the rebels, the room fell silent. Jax's jaw tightened. He glanced around the room and noticed the subtle shifts in posture among his team. Some exchanged nervous looks. Others stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact. A young recruit named Fren, barely out of training, finally broke the silence. "What's wrong with Earthborn?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Jax turned to him sharply, his expression cold and unreadable. "You don't ask questions about them," he snapped, cutting off any further discussion. Vren swallowed hard and stepped back, sensing he had crossed an invisible line. Back on Earth, a small group of soldiers moved with purpose through a high-tech facility. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were part of the Earthborn Division, an elite unit renowned for their skill and determination. Their commander, Daniel Hayes, walked alongside them, his calm demeanor masking the weight of the mission ahead. His team consisted of Rachel Stone, a tech genius with a knack for hacking; Alex Carter, an explosives expert with a sharp mind; Claire Bennett, a sharpshooter with nerves of steel; and Logan Wright, a resourceful tactician who could adapt to any situation. Daniel called the team to a halt in front of a large screen displaying a map of the mining colony. "This is our target," he began, pointing to a cluster of structures surrounded by barren terrain. "The syndicate has been exploiting human colonists for years, and now they've hired mercenaries to crush the rebellion. Our job is simple: get in, dismantle their operation, and protect those colonists." His tone left no room for doubt. Failure was not an option. Rachel leaned forward, studying the map closely. "Looks like they got heavy defenses," she said, her fingers flying over a tablet as she accessed satellite data. "Automated turrets, patrol drones, and probably a few surprises we haven't seen yet." Alex cracked a grin. "Good thing we're better at surprises than they are." Claire adjusted the strap of her rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "We'll need to move fast and stay hidden. If the mercenaries spot us too early, we're dead." Logan nodded in agreement. "And if the syndicate sends reinforcements, we'll have to be ready to pull out or fight our way through." Daniel watched his team, pride swelling in his chest. They weren't just soldiers, they were a family, bound by trust and shared experiences. He knew the challenges ahead would test them, but he also knew they were capable of overcoming anything. As they prepared to leave, he reminded them of one last thing. "Remember who we are," he said firmly. "We're Earthborn. Across the galaxy, our name commands respect and fear. Let's make sure it stays that way." Unbeknownst to both groups, their paths were about to collide in ways neither could predict. On one side, the Krylos Vanguard braced themselves for a fight against an enemy shrouded in mystery. On the other, the Earthborn Division readied themselves to prove, once again, why their names struck terror into the hearts of all who opposed them. The Krylos Vanguard arrived at the mining colony first, their cruiser descending silently through the planet's thick, dusty atmosphere. The surface was harsh and unforgiving, a barren wasteland of jagged rocks and deep trenches. Jax Corvin led his team out onto the cracked ground, his heavy boots crunching against the dry soil. Around him, the mercenaries moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the area for threats. Their advanced drones zipped into the air, small but deadly machines designed to map the terrain and locate enemy positions. As they approached the colony, its size became clear. It was a sprawling labyrinth of metal structures, tunnels, and fortified walls. Automated turrets lined the perimeter, their cold, mechanical eyes scanning for intruders. Inside, alien enforcers patrolled the narrow pathways, ensuring no one dared to challenge the Syndicate's rule. The colonists themselves were nowhere to be seen, likely locked away in cramped quarters or forced to work in the mines below. Jax signaled for his team to spread out, securing key points while they waited for reinforcements from the Syndicate. Back on Earth, the Earthborn division prepared for their own arrival. Daniel Hayes stood at the helm of their dropship, gazing out at the stars as they hurtled toward the distant planet. His team was quiet, each member focused on the task ahead. Rachel sat at a workstation, her fingers flying over a keyboard as she analyzed satellite images of the colony. "Their security is tight," she said, pointing to clusters of turrets and patrol routes, "but nothing we can't handle." Alex grinned, checking his explosives one last time. "I'll make sure those turrets won't be a problem for long." Claire adjusted her rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the equipment around her. "Just don't blow us up while you're at it," she teased, earning a chuckle from Logan. He was busy studying the layout of the colony, memorizing every detail. "We'll need to move fast," he said. "Once we're inside, there's no turning back." The dropship entered the planet's atmosphere under the cover of darkness, landing far from the colony to avoid detection. As the ramp lowered, the Earthborn team stepped out, their movements silent and deliberate. The air was cold and dry, carrying the faint scent of metal and dust. Rachel activated her hacking device, connecting to the colony's security network. Within moments, she had disabled several cameras, creating blind spots for the team to exploit. "We got about 10 minutes before they notice something's wrong," she whispered. "Let's move." Alex worked quickly, planting small charges along critical infrastructure. If things went south, they could detonate the charges and cripple the colony's operations. Claire and Logan stayed close, their weapons ready as they scanned the shadows for any sign of trouble. Daniel kept them moving, his voice low but firm. "Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into." Inside the colony, the Krylos Vanguard grew uneasy. One of their drones suddenly went offline, its signal vanishing without warning. Jax frowned, his instincts telling him something was wrong. "Send a patrol to investigate," he ordered, his voice tense. A group of mercenaries moved cautiously toward the source of the disturbance, their weapons drawn. They didn't have to wait long to find out what had happened. From the shadows, the Earthborn division struck. Rachel hacked into the colony's systems again, turning the automated turrets against the mercenaries. Bullets whizzed through the air as Alex and Logan opened fire, their shots precise and deadly. Claire provided covering fire, picking off enemies with ease. The mercenaries were caught completely off guard, their confidence shattered by the sudden ambush. Jax watched the chaos unfold from a distance, his mind racing. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were too skilled, too coordinated. He clenched his fists, realizing the truth. "Earthborn," he muttered under his breath. The stories were true. These humans didn't fight like others. They thought ahead, adapted, and never gave up. For the first time in years, Jax felt a flicker of doubt. If the Earthborn were here, the mission was already more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The ambush left the Krylos Vanguard scrambling to regroup. The patrol sent to investigate the drone's disappearance was wiped out in minutes, their bodies lying motionless in the shadows of the colony's metal walls. Jax Corvin clenched his jaw as he surveyed the scene through a tactical display on his wrist. The Earthborn had struck swiftly and vanished without a trace, leaving behind only destruction. His mind raced, trying to piece together how they had been outmaneuvered so easily. These humans were unlike anything he had faced before. Back at the Mercenaries' temporary base, a makeshift command center set up in one of the colony's larger structures, Jax called an emergency meeting. The room was tense, the air thick with frustration and unease. "They're not just soldiers," Jax said, his voice low but firm. "They're strategists. They think ahead, adapt, and hit where you least expect it." He paused, letting his words sink in. This is why the name Earthborn strikes fear into anyone who knows it. Vren, the young recruit, shifted uncomfortably. "But how do we fight them?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "If they're always one step ahead, how do we even stand a chance?" Jax glared at him for a moment, then softened. "We don't underestimate them," he replied, "and we stay alert. If they come again, we'll be ready." Meanwhile, the Earthborn division moved deeper into the colony, sticking to the shadows and avoiding detection. Rachel Stone led the way, her tablet lighting up with real-time updates from the colony's hacked security system. "They're pulling back to their base," she whispered, pointing to a cluster of dots on the screen. "Looks like they're regrouping." Daniel nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the area. "Good. That buys us some time." Alex Carter crouched beside a pile of crates, checking his explosives. "I've rigged a few key spots," he said. "If things go sideways, we can collapse some tunnels and cut them off." Claire Bennett stood nearby, her rifle trained on a distant corner. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she muttered. "These guys are tough, but I'd rather not get cornered." Logan Wright studied the map, tracing possible routes with his finger. "There's a weak point in their perimeter," he said. "If we move fast, we can sabotage their supplies and force them to retreat." Daniel considered the plan, weighing the risks. It was bold, but it could work. "All right," he said finally. "Rachel, keep an eye on their movements. Alex, prep the charges. Claire, Logan, you're with me. Let's hit them hard and fast." As the team prepared for their next move, the Krylos vanguard braced for another attack. Jax ordered his men to fortify their position, setting up traps and reinforcing defenses. But no matter how much they prepared, the nagging feeling of uncertainty lingered. The Earthborn had already proven they could outthink and outmaneuver the Mercenaries. What else did they have planned? Hours passed in tense silence. The Mercenaries waited, their weapons ready, their nerves frayed. Then, without warning, alarms blared throughout the colony. Rachel had triggered the automated systems again, creating chaos and drawing the Mercenaries' attention away from their base. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel and his team struck. They moved like ghosts, slipping through the shadows and planting explosives in strategic locations. When the first explosion rocked the colony, panic erupted among the Krylos vanguard. Jax shouted orders, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The Earthborn were everywhere and nowhere, striking with precision and disappearing before they could be countered. For every move the Mercenaries made, the Earthborn seemed 2 steps ahead. Jax watched the destruction unfold, his frustration boiling over. He had heard the stories about Earthborn units, but seeing their tactics firsthand was something else entirely. These humans didn't just fight. They waged war with intelligence, patience, and relentless determination. And now, they were proving exactly why the galaxy feared them. The colony was now a battleground, with both sides locked in a deadly game of shadows. The Krylos vanguard tried to adapt to the Earthborn division's tactics, but every attempt ended in failure. The Mercenaries set traps, only for the humans to bypass them effortlessly. They sent out patrols, only to have them ambushed and wiped out. Jax Corvin watched his team grow more frustrated with each passing hour. The Earthborn were relentless, striking where they least expected it and disappearing before they could retaliate. Inside the colony, the Earthborn division worked with precision and coordination. Rachel Stone sat in a hidden corner, her tablet glowing softly as she monitored the Mercenaries' movements. "They're pulling guards back to their base," she whispered to Daniel Hayes. Looks like they're trying to fortify. Daniel nodded, his mind already forming a plan. Good. That means they're scared. Let's keep pressing them. Alex Carter moved ahead, planting small charges in key locations. His hands worked quickly, his focus unwavering. These will cut off their escape routes, he said, grinning as he finished setting the last one. Claire Bennett stayed close, her rifle ready. She scanned the area, her sharp eyes catching every flicker of movement. Just make sure you don't blow us up while we're still here, she teased, though her tone carried an edge of seriousness. Logan Wright studied the map on his wrist device, pointing out possible ambush points. If we hit them from here, we can force them into a bottleneck, he suggested. Daniel agreed, signaling for the team to move forward. Back at the Mercenaries' base, tension was mounting. The Krylos Vanguard had lost several key positions, and their confidence was crumbling. Vren, the young recruit, paced nervously, his weapon clutched tightly in his hands. We can't keep doing this, he muttered. Every time we try something, they're already there waiting for us. Jax shot him a sharp look, silencing him instantly. But deep down, Jax knew Vren was right. The Earthborn were dismantling their defenses piece by piece, and there was no clear way to stop them. Jax called another meeting, his expression grim. We need to change our strategy, he said. If we stay defensive, they'll pick us apart. We need to take the fight to them. Some of the mercenaries exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen what happened when they went on the offensive. Chaos and defeat. But Jax was determined. We'll split into 2 teams, he continued. One will create a diversion, drawing them out. The other will strike directly at their position. It was risky, but it was their only chance. As the mercenaries prepared to execute their new plan, the Earthborn division was already one step ahead. Rachel noticed the shift in their movements on her screen. They're splitting up, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Looks like they're planning something big. Daniel frowned, studying the data. They're trying to draw us out, he said, but they don't know we've been watching them the whole time. Claire adjusted her grip on her rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. What's the plan? She asked. Daniel smiled faintly. We let them think they've got the upper hand, he replied. Then we turn the tables. The mercenaries launched their attack under the cover of darkness. One team created a loud diversion, firing at random targets and drawing the Earthborn's attention. The second team moved stealthily, heading straight for what they believed was the humans' position. But when they arrived, they found nothing but empty crates and discarded equipment. Before they could react, the Earthborn struck. Rachel had hacked into the colony's systems again, cutting off their retreat. Alex detonated the charges, collapsing tunnels and trapping the mercenaries in a narrow corridor. Claire and Logan opened fire from above, their shots precise and deadly. The mercenaries were caught in a perfect ambush, unable to fight back effectively. Jax watched the chaos unfold, his frustration boiling over. He had underestimated the Earthborn once again. These humans weren't just soldiers, they were hunters, tracking their prey with patience and precision. And now, the Krylos Vanguard was paying the price for their arrogance. The ambush left the Krylos Vanguard in disarray. Trapped in a narrow corridor with no clear way out, the mercenaries fought back desperately, but their efforts were futile against the Earthborn's precision tactics. Jax Corvin shouted orders, trying to rally his team, but the situation was spiraling out of control. Explosions rocked the tunnels as Alex Carter detonated more charges, collapsing sections of the colony and cutting off escape routes. The mercenaries' weapons fired wildly, their shots ricocheting off the metal walls, but they couldn't hit their elusive enemies. From above, Claire Bennett and Logan Wright provided relentless covering fire. Claire's rifle cracked with deadly accuracy, each shot finding its mark. Logan moved swiftly, adjusting their position to keep the pressure on. They're falling apart, he said, glancing down at the chaos below. Claire nodded, her focus unwavering. Let's finish this. Back at the center of the colony, Rachel Stone monitored the mercenaries' movements through her tablet. Her fingers danced across the screen, rerouting power to different sections of the facility and keeping the enemy confused. "Their leader's still alive," she reported to Daniel Hayes, who stood nearby, watching the battle unfold. "He's trying to regroup, but it's not going well for them." Daniel's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good. Keep him distracted while we move in." Meanwhile, cracks began to form within the Krylus vanguard. Vren, the young recruit, crouched behind a pile of rubble, his weapon trembling in his hands. He glanced around at his teammates, some injured, others visibly shaken. "This is hopeless," he muttered under his breath. A veteran mercenary nearby heard him and snapped, "Shut up and fight. We're not done yet." But Vren's doubt had already taken root, spreading quietly among the group. For every order Jax gave, fewer mercenaries followed with conviction. Fear was eating away at their resolve. Jax noticed the change and gritted his teeth. He knew morale was slipping, but he couldn't afford to let it break completely. "We're not losing this fight," he barked, his voice echoing through the corridor. "Stick together and push forward." His words carried weight, but even he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. These humans weren't just soldiers, they were something else entirely. Every trap they set was countered, every strategy unraveled before it could take hold. It was as if the Earthborn could read their minds. Daniel led his team into position, closing in on the mercenaries' last stronghold. "Rachel, can you disable their comms?" he asked. Rachel nodded, her fingers flying over her tablet. "Already on it," she replied. Moments later, static filled the mercenaries' communication channels, cutting them off from one another. Panic rippled through their ranks as they realized they were truly alone. Jax cursed under his breath, slamming his fist against a wall. Without comms, his ability to coordinate his team was severely limited. He turned to Vren, who looked pale and uncertain. "You, stay here and cover this entrance," he ordered. Vren hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. As Jax moved deeper into the tunnel, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was slipping further out of his control. The Earthborn division pressed their advantage. Alex planted one final charge near the mercenaries' position, ensuring there would be no way out once it detonated. "That should do it," he said, stepping back with a satisfied grin. Logan checked his weapon, his sharp eyes scanning the area. "Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." When the charge exploded, the remaining mercenaries were thrown into chaos. Some tried to flee, only to find their paths blocked by collapsed tunnels or Earthborn soldiers waiting in ambush. Others stayed and fought, but their resistance was short-lived. One by one, they fell, until only Jax and a handful of his team remained. Cornered and outnumbered, Jax raised his weapon, his expression grim. He had heard the stories about Earthborn units, but now he understood them in full. These humans didn't just win battles, they broke their enemies, mentally and physically. And as he prepared for what might be his final stand, Jax couldn't help but wonder if the legends about the Earthborn were true, that they never gave up, never backed down, and never lost. The final moments of the battle were intense and chaotic. Jax Corvin stood with his back against a crumbling wall, his weapon raised but his mind racing. Around him, the remnants of the Krylus vanguard fought desperately, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. The Earthborn division had them surrounded, cutting off every possible escape route. Explosions echoed through the tunnels, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe. Jax glanced at his remaining team members. Some were injured, clutching wounds as they tried to hold their ground. Others looked terrified, their earlier confidence shattered by the relentless pressure of the Earthborn. Vren, the young recruit, was crouched nearby, trembling as he reloaded his weapon. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Jax didn't answer immediately. He knew their options were limited. They could fight until the end or surrender, but neither choice seemed appealing. Surrendering to the Earthborn felt like signing their death warrants, yet continuing to fight seemed equally hopeless. From above, Claire Bennett and Logan Wright kept the mercenaries pinned down. Claire's rifle cracked steadily, each shot finding its mark. Logan moved cautiously, ensuring they maintained the advantage. "They're breaking," he said, observing the mercenaries' disarray. Claire nodded, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of retaliation. "Let's finish this quickly," she replied, her tone cold and focused. Daniel Hayes led the rest of the Earthborn team into position, closing the noose around the mercenaries. Rachel Stone stayed behind, monitoring the situation through her tablet. "Their leader's still holding on," she reported, "but his team's falling apart." Daniel frowned slightly, considering their next move. "We'll give them one chance to surrender," he said. "If they don't take it, we move in." A loud voice suddenly echoed through the tunnels. It was Daniel, using a megaphone to amplify his words. "This is Commander Daniel Hayes of the Earthborn Division," he called out. "You're surrounded, and you have no way out. Lay down your weapons, and we'll let you live. Resist, and you'll regret it." His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. Jax clenched his jaw, torn between defiance and survival. He glanced at his team, seeing the fear in their eyes. Vren looked up at him, silently pleading for guidance. For a moment, Jax considered fighting to the death, but the weight of reality pressed down on him. He had heard the stories about the Earthborn, how they always won, no matter the odds. Now, facing them directly, he understood why. These humans weren't just skilled fighters. They were relentless, adaptable, and utterly fearless. Finally, Jax lowered his weapon, raising his hand slowly. "Stand down," he ordered his team, his voice heavy with resignation. One by one, the remaining mercenaries followed his lead, dropping their weapons and raising their hands. Vren hesitated for a moment, but eventually complied, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The Earthborn moved in, securing the area and ensuring none of the mercenaries could pose a threat. Claire and Logan kept their weapons trained on the group as Daniel approached Jax. "You put up a good fight," Daniel said, his tone neutral. "But it's over now." Jax met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "You don't know what you've started here," he muttered darkly. Daniel didn't respond, choosing instead to signal for his team to escort the mercenaries out of the colony. As the mercenaries were led away, the Earthborn division regrouped. Alex Carter checked the charges one last time, ensuring the colony's operations were completely crippled. "That should do it," he said, brushing dust off his hands. Rachel nodded, her tablet showing the extent of the damage. "Their systems are offline. Even if reinforcements arrive, they won't be able to salvage much." Daniel watched as his team worked, pride swelling in his chest. They had accomplished their mission, freeing the colonists and dismantling the Syndicate's operation. But he also knew the implications of their victory. Word of this battle would spread, further solidifying the Earthborn's reputation across the galaxy. To many, their name would remain a symbol of fear and respect. And to others, like the Krylos Vanguard, it would serve as a warning. Never underestimate the Earthborn. The colony was finally quiet, the sounds of battle replaced by an eerie stillness. The Earthborn division moved through the wreckage, ensuring the area was secure. Daniel Hayes led the way, his boots crunching against debris as he surveyed the damage. The once imposing structures were now scared and broken, their walls pockmarked with bullet holes and scorch marks from explosions. Smoke lingered in the air, mixing with the metallic scent of destruction. Rachel Stone stayed close to Daniel, her tablet glowing faintly as she scanned for any remaining threats. "All systems are down," she reported. "The mercenaries' equipment is useless, and the Syndicate's operations are completely shut down." Alex Carter walked beside her, kicking a discarded weapon out of curiosity. "Good thing we got here when we did," he said. "If those colonists had been forced to work another day in these conditions, they wouldn't have lasted much longer." Claire Bennett and Logan Wright brought up the rear, keeping watch for any surprises. Claire adjusted her rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows. "Still feels too quiet," she muttered. Logan nodded, his expression cautious. "Yeah, but I think we've done enough to scare them off for good." As the team made their way deeper into the colony, they found the human colonists locked away in cramped quarters. The sight was heartbreaking. Men, women, and children huddled together, their faces gaunt and weary. Many looked too exhausted to even react when the Earthborn arrived. Daniel stepped forward, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's over," he said gently. "You're safe now. We've taken care of the mercenaries." At first, there was silence. Then, slowly, the colonists began to stir. A woman with tired eyes stood up, clutching a child to her chest. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are they really gone?" Daniel nodded. "They're not coming back. You're free." Relief washed over the group, followed by tears and quiet sobs. Some colonists embraced one another, while others simply sank to the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of their newfound freedom. Rachel approached them, her tone soft and reassuring. "We'll get you out of here soon," she said. "For now, stay close, and we'll make sure you're safe." Meanwhile, outside the colony, the captured mercenaries were being loaded onto a transport ship. Jax Corvin stood apart from the others, his arms crossed as he stared at the horizon. His face was unreadable, but his body language spoke volumes. He was defeated, humiliated, and angry. Vryn, the young recruit, sat nearby, his head bowed in shame. He glanced at Jax occasionally, as if seeking guidance, but the leader offered no words of comfort. One of the Earthborn soldiers approached Jax, holding a device that would erase sensitive data from the mercenaries' gear. "This isn't personal," the soldier said, his tone neutral. Jax didn't respond. He simply watched as the soldier worked, his mind replaying the events of the battle. He had underestimated the Earthborn, and it had cost him everything. Their tactics, their coordination, their sheer determination, it was unlike anything he had ever faced. Back inside the colony, Daniel gathered his team for a final debrief. "We've done what we came here to do," he said, his voice steady. "But our job isn't finished yet. We need to escort the colonists to safety and make sure this place can never be used again." Alex grinned, slapping his pack of explosives. "Already on it," he said. "I'll rig the main tunnels to collapse once we're clear." Rachel nodded, already planning how to disable any lingering tech that might pose a risk. As they prepared to leave, Daniel paused, looking around at the devastation. He knew their actions would have consequences, not just for the colonists, but for the galaxy as a whole. Word of this fight would spread, adding another chapter to the legend of the Earthborn. To some, they would remain heroes. To others, they would be a cautionary tale. But one thing was certain: anyone who dared cross paths with the Earthborn would think twice before doing so again. The team moved out, leading the colonists toward the dropship. Behind them, the colony groaned under the strain of Alex's final charges. As they reached a safe distance, a series of muffled explosions echoed through the barren landscape, collapsing the tunnels and sealing the facility forever. The Earthborn stood together, watching as dust rose into the sky, marking the end of another mission and the beginning of another legend. The Earthborn division stood at the edge of the ruined colony, watching as the dust settled over what had once been a symbol of oppression. The colonists were safe aboard the dropship, their weary faces now filled with hope for a brighter future. Daniel Hayes gave one last look at the desolate landscape before turning to his team. "We did good," he said simply, his voice carrying both pride and relief. Rachel Stone nodded, her tablet tucked under her arm. "They'll have a chance to rebuild now," she added softly. Alex Carter stretched his arms, letting out a low whistle. "Not bad for a day's work," he joked, though there was no mistaking the seriousness in his tone. Claire Bennett adjusted her rifle strap, glancing back at the collapsed tunnels. "Let's just hope no one tries to dig this place back up," she muttered. Logan Wright stood quietly, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "Even if they do, they'll think twice after hearing about us," he said with a faint smile. As the dropship lifted off, carrying the colonists and the Earthborn team away from the planet, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had faced one of the most feared mercenary groups in the galaxy and emerged victorious. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about proving, once again, why the Earthborn name commanded respect and fear across the stars. Their tactics, their teamwork, their unyielding determination, all of it had come together to dismantle an operation that had enslaved innocent lives. Back on their cruiser, the surviving members of the Krylos Vanguard sat in silence, their morale shattered. Jax Corvin stared out of a viewport, his expression unreadable. Vren, the young recruit, sat nearby, his head bowed. The rest of the mercenaries avoided eye contact, each lost in their own thoughts. For them, the battle had been more than a defeat. It had been a lesson, a harsh reminder of the power and skill of the Earthborn units. When the Syndicate received word of the failure, they were furious. Their representatives demanded answers, but none of the mercenaries could offer explanations beyond murmurs of the Earthborn's relentless tactics. "They're not like other soldiers," one of them said during a debriefing. "They don't stop. They don't make mistakes." Another added grimly, "If you hear Earthborn coming your way, you'd better run." Across the galaxy, stories of the battle spread quickly. Traders, bounty hunters, and mercenaries swapped tales of how the Krylos Vanguard, a group known for taking on impossible missions, had been utterly dismantled by a small team of humans. Some dismissed the accounts as exaggerations, while others swore they were true. Either way, the legend of the Earthborn grew stronger, becoming a cautionary tale whispered in shadowy corners of space stations and cantinas. For Daniel and his team, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be for soldiers of their reputation. They continued their work, traveling to distant planets and taking on missions that others deemed too dangerous or impossible. But the memory of the mining colony lingered, a testament to their skill and resolve. Each member of the Earthborn division carried it with them, knowing they had once again proven why their names struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. As the cruiser sailed through the stars, Daniel gathered his team for a quiet moment. "We've earned our rest," he said, his voice steady. "But remember this, every mission we take, every fight we win, it's not just for us. It's for everyone who can't fight for themselves." His words resonated deeply with the team, reinforcing their purpose and unity. In the end, the battle at the mining colony became another chapter in the Earthborn's legacy, a story of courage, strategy, and unwavering determination. And for those who dared to oppose them, it served as a stark warning: never underestimate the Earthborn.